Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story that came out in the Atlanta Black Star. As crime falls nationwide, white conservative rural areas fuel a new prison boom. All right. I'm going to go a little further down in this article, about right here. And as a clear example in this new trend in rural incarceration, the white, rural, politically conservative enclave of Dearborn County, Indiana, sends more people to prison per capita than any other county in the nation, and more than San Francisco and Durham, North Carolina combined. This reflects the trend in which residents of small counties are 50% more likely to go to prison than those who live in larger counties. Rural jurisdictions are also more resistant to criminal justice reform and lighter sentences, and cities have more resources to provide drug treatment as an alternative to prison. The emergence of the opioid addiction among white Americans has resulted in a push to treat white drug use as a public health issue, at least rhetorically, in contrast to the war on drugs that had been waged for decades in Black communities and has fueled mass incarceration and police practices such as racial profiling and stop and frisk. Nonetheless, as Black and Latino rates of incarcerations have fallen, the white rate has increased. Although the racial disparities remain, while the Black community benefited from community-based initiatives and organizations and shifts in crack cocaine sentencing, whites have experienced widespread poverty since the Great Recession. Black people also were hit hardest in economic downturns and are no strangers to poverty and depravity. White communities not used to hard times are experiencing deteriorating lives prospects as the coal mines and auto factories shutter, including more drug and alcohol abuse and heightened mortality and suicides. For the past 2 years, life expectancy has fallen due to drug addiction, despair, and suicide, especially among middle-aged white Americans and people living in rural communities. Although the United States once enjoyed the highest life expectancy in the world, it has fallen behind 35 other industrialized countries and has poorer health than many other nations. Young white adults between 25 and 34 are the first generation since the Vietnam War to experience higher death rates in early adulthood than the generation before, contributing to white mortality amid falling death rates for Black and Latino Americans. Further, white people are the angriest in America, as a 2016 poll revealed, with the sentiment attributed to a feeling that they have lost the American dream. Well, the American dream was never real. Okay, it was never real. You can't lose something that was a fantasy, and are worse off and unable to get ahead. Well, that's, this is the way you wanted to set up your society. So whose fault is that? On the other hand, Black people who have had hundreds of years of slavery, segregation, racial discrimination to develop coping mechanisms might not expect their income, standard of living, and social status to are destined to steadily improve. They don't have the same confidence that If they worked hard, they will surely get ahead, which is also a fakery in America. Working hard has not gotten a lot of people ahead. That's why there's a working poor class in the country. And that's proof right there. Many of those people get out of their beds and work hard every day, and they are still classified as working poor. So, no, again, this is all fantasy, mirrors and smoke screens. None of this stuff is real. Okay. That whites, particularly non college educated whites, are in despair, overdosing and drinking themselves to death, even as they fare better than Black people, is attributed to what John Hopkins sociologist Andrew J. Sherlin chalks up to be reference group theory. Under this theory, people behaved based on how they fare with respect to their parents. Therefore, white people feel as if they are worse off because they don't have as much economically as the previous generation of white folks. Although white people control the society and dominate people of color economically. That's why I don't understand why y'all are so in the ditch. Aren't you? Isn't this the way you wanted to run your society? You know what the funny part is? Many of us saw this train wreck decades ago. But some people are so blinded by their own arrogance, they can't see what's ahead of them. I knew this society was going to fail. The way it was ran, all of this preferential treatment and uh, this group of people get treated different from that. You can't make that stuff last forever. Are you kidding me? I just can't believe. I guess those high IQs just make you blind or something. Rural whites, a solid block of Trump voting base, are more concerned about their children's economic future, the lack of jobs, and immigrant workers taking jobs away from American workers than other whites, according to Pew Research. White people are more likely to own guns than Black and Latino people, while non college educated white men, 72% of whom voted for Trump, are particularly more likely to own guns. NRA propaganda fuel the anger, paranoia, and racial and gender based resentment of this segment of the population. The way I see it, I don't see how you can blame anybody else for your issues other than yourself. Again, who made the decision to run this society like this? It sure wasn't Black people. We weren't in no position to make those kind of decisions. This takes place in an environment in which Trump incites violence and scapegoats people of color in his rallies. In this environment, some white men, including armed Trump supporters, turn their anger into violence, and with a fear of being replaced and falling behind. They stockpile weapons, join violent hate groups, and murder people. White men fuel racial violence and also become the mass shooters, which we know is true, more than any other group. In fact, I did a story a week ago. There were 154 mass shootings in America, none done by Black men. Zero. White domestic terrorists commit the most acts of terror in the United States, kill the most police officers, and infiltrate law enforcement. White people blaming Black people and other groups for their problems has been a highlight of the Trump phenomena. Yet their voting decision will only perpetuate and exacerbate the underlying downward spiral that fuels white rage, white despair, and white violence, according to a forthcoming article in the American Economic Review. Racism rather than economic self interest explains the entire deflection of Southern white conservatives from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party between 1958 and 1980. Today, whites are economically insecure and stressed over the darkening of America and the attendant prospect of loss of preferred social political status that white skin has provided. Well, ladies and gentlemen, all of their advantages are things they sat around and made up. They have no real physical advantage over Black people at all. They have none. Everything that they have an advantage on are things they had to write into law, or just things that they have to do, on a regular basis on a social level to give each other preferential treatment. But as far as their real physical advantage, there is none. There is none at all. You can't burn up out in the sun and then claim that your skin is some advantage. It really isn't. Trump global trade war with threats to impose tariff on steel, aluminum, and other imports, and the retaliatory tariffs from China and Europe will cause pain through job loss in the red states that support him. And see, that's what they don't see coming, ladies and gentlemen. I see this coming. I see it coming. As this trade war, we're already in it. I mean, it ain't coming. We're already in it. As it heats up, you're going to see people losing jobs left and right all over the country. And the sad part is, they're not going to look at this and see that it's stemming from Trump's trade war. They're going to come out here in public and take it out on Black people. That's what they're going to do. And they're not going to go after Trump, who's causing this whole thing. You may be cheering him on. I promise you, you won't be cheering when these jobs are lost behind this trade war that he initiated. In retaliation, China will target soybean and pork products. 8 of the top 10 exporting states for both soybean and pork are red states, with Iowa, who is sending $14.6 billion in soybeans to China. Okay. If many of you did not know this, China gets virtually all of their soybeans from the United States. That's where it comes from. Or 1/3 of their crop, and more than the rest of the world combined. The administration failure to fight climate change will hurt southern states the most and deal a severe economic blow to the region, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. Even the planned change in 2020 census, reinstituting the citizenship question, would lead to an undercount that could harm red states as much or more than blue states, with possible federal funding cut for 14 red states, amounting to 181 electoral votes, as opposed to 2 blue states and the District of Columbia accounting for a mere 63 electoral votes. Trump voters are already feeling the pain, although on by these policies. And you know what? They're really feeling the pain on the farms. That's why there's so much suicide going on. These folks are literally losing their farms. Their farms are rotting. The stuff is not being harvested because of the immigration policies that are going on in the country. There are people losing crops that are worth $3 million because they don't have the labor. And these folks can't do the labor. We already know that through history. They can't do the labor because their skin will not allow them to go out there and do the labor. They'll burn up and die, even with sunscreen on. If The increased violence of rural America is due to hard economic times and a feeling of despair. Their support for politicians and policies who will exacerbate their pain is an example of a self-inflicted wound. So there you have it. Economic times, drug addiction, suicide. First of all, drug addiction alone, we know this in the Black community, will drive crime up. We experienced this in the Black community back during the crack epidemic. Again, when we tried to bring this up, we were told we were inherently violent. But now they are going through an identical thing in the rural Republican controlled areas in the country. I bet you they won't say they're inherently violent now. I bet you that won't come from anybody's mouth. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen, now that the incarceration rate is going through the roof in the rural areas and it's dropping everywhere else in the country. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell. And I will see you on the next video. And if you can support my channel, ladies and gentlemen, your support is deeply appreciated. Peace, family.